Fear does not knock loudly when it enters our lives. It arrives quietly, settles into our thoughts, and slowly convinces us to live smaller than we were meant to. It tells us to wait, to hesitate, to doubt the very dreams that keep our hearts awake at night. Yet somewhere beneath that trembling silence lives a truth we cannot ignore. Every life that has ever grown, healed, or transformed began at the moment someone chose not to run from fear, but to rise above it. Today is not about being fearless. It is about remembering the strength that has been waiting patiently inside you, asking for its turn to lead. Fear is a learned shadow, and anything learned can be unlearned. Somewhere along the way, fear was taught to you by moments that hurt, by voices that doubted, by experiences that left marks you did not ask for. It grew quietly, convincing you it was protecting you, when in truth it was only limiting you. But what is learned can be released, and what is released makes room for something stronger. You are not bound to the lessons of pain forever. You are allowed to choose a new understanding of yourself. Fear survives on repetition. It repeats the same old stories until they sound like truth. It reminds you of every failure but forgets to mention every time you stood back up. It magnifies the risk and minimizes your resilience. Yet fear has never created a future worth living. It has never written a brave story. The moment you question it, the moment you refuse to accept it as fact, its power begins to weaken. There is a quiet courage inside you that has been waiting for permission, not the kind of courage that roars, but the kind that breathes deeply and takes one step forward anyway. Courage does not promise ease. It promises growth, and growth often asks you to walk through uncertainty with nothing but belief as your guide. That belief does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be present. You may feel afraid because you are standing on the edge of something meaningful. Fear often appears when change is near, when your life is about to expand beyond what you have known. Do not mistake discomfort for danger. The unfamiliar is not your enemy. It is simply a doorway you have never walked through before. Every time you choose to face fear, you reclaim your voice. You remind yourself that your past does not own your future. You remind your heart that survival was never the final goal, living fully was. And yes, your hands may shake, your thoughts may doubt, but your spirit knows the direction. Trust that knowing. Release the belief that you must be fearless to move forward. Strength is not the absence of fear, it is the decision not to obey it. Let fear walk beside you if it must, but do not let it choose your destination. You are capable of more than you have allowed yourself to imagine. Today is not asking you to conquer everything at once. It is asking you to begin. One honest step, one brave decision, one moment of faith. That is how fear loosens its grip. That is how confidence is born. You have spent enough time hiding parts of yourself to feel safe. Now is the time to live whole. Now is the time to unlearn fear and remember who you were before it spoke so loudly. Your life is calling you forward. Answer it. Courage begins the moment you decide your life deserves more. Not more applause, not more approval, but more truth, more space, more honesty about what your heart has been asking for. That decision is quiet, almost invisible to the world, yet it shifts something deep inside you. It is the instant you stop accepting a life that only looks safe and start reaching for a life that feels right. For too long, you may have settled for less because less felt familiar. You learned how to survive there. You learned how to manage disappointment, how to shrink your expectations, how to silence your longing. But courage does not come from comfort. It comes from that restless feeling that says, there must be more than this. When you honor that feeling, you take your first step toward becoming whole. Choosing courage does not mean you suddenly feel strong. Often, it means you feel exposed. It means you admit that what you have been tolerating is no longer enough. It means you stop pretending that your dreams are unrealistic and start admitting they are necessary. Courage asks you to be honest before it asks you to be brave. There will be moments when fear argues that wanting more is selfish, that reaching higher will cost you love, belonging, or peace. But courage reminds you that a life lived half awake costs even more. It costs joy, it costs purpose, it costs the chance to discover who you might become if you stopped holding yourself back. When you decide your life deserves more, you begin to treat yourself differently. You stop ignoring your inner voice. You stop explaining away your pain. You start setting boundaries where there were none and choosing growth where there was once avoidance. These choices may feel uncomfortable, but they are deeply respectful acts. They are proof that you are no longer abandoning yourself. Courage also teaches patience. It understands that change is not instant and healing is not linear. Some days you will move forward, and other days you will stand still, gathering strength. Both are part of becoming. What matters is that you no longer turn back just to feel safe. You stay present with the process, trusting that every step is shaping you. As you choose courage again and again, something remarkable happens. Fear begins to lose its authority. It still speaks, but its voice is softer now. It no longer controls your decisions. You learn that you can feel afraid and still choose what honors your growth. You learn that courage is not a single act, but a daily commitment to yourself. Your life deserves more than hesitation. It deserves your full participation. It deserves the version of you that is willing to try, to fail, to rise, and to try again. Courage begins with a decision, but it becomes a way of living. And once you choose it, there is no going back to a smaller life. You were born with wings, not chains, yet somewhere along the road of becoming, you were taught to doubt your own ability to fly. Life placed expectations on your shoulders, and fear tightened them into restraints. You learned to walk carefully, to measure every step, to stay close to the ground where falling would hurt less. But the truth has never changed. Your spirit was designed for more than cautious living. It was designed for movement, for elevation, for freedom. Chains are not always visible. Some are made of memories that wounded you, some of words spoken when you were too young to defend yourself, and some of disappointments that convinced you dreaming was dangerous. Over time, those chains begin to feel familiar, even necessary. You start believing they are part of who you are, forgetting they were only something placed upon you. But chains can be removed. They were never rooted in your soul. Wings grow stronger when they are used. Every time you silence your desire, every time you choose safety over truth, those wings grow tired, not broken, just waiting for you to remember that comfort is not the same as fulfillment, and survival is not the same as living. The ache you feel when you imagine a bigger life is not foolishness. It is your wings stretching, asking for space. Fear will try to convince you that flight is reckless. It will remind you of gravity, of past falls, of the opinions of those who chose not to leap themselves. But fear has never understood purpose. It only understands control. Your wings were never meant to guarantee perfection. They were meant to give you the courage to rise, even when the sky feels uncertain. There is a moment, quiet and personal, when you realize that staying bound hurts more than the risk of flying. That moment changes everything. It is when you stop asking, "What if I fail?" and begin asking, "What if I never try?" The pain of remaining small begins to outweigh the fear of becoming visible. Freedom does not arrive all at once. It comes in choices, small, deliberate acts of self-trust, speaking when your voice trembles, saying no when you were trained to please, taking a step toward what calls you, even if you do not yet see the whole path. Each choice loosens a chain. Each brave act strengthens a wing. You do not need permission to fly. You do not need approval to grow. Your wings are already yours, and they have been patient. They have carried your resilience through storms you never planned for. They have held your hope when everything else felt uncertain. They are ready now. So loosen what binds you. Release what weighs you down. Lift yourself gently but firmly toward the life that feels true. You were not born to live constrained by fear. You were born to rise, to expand, to claim the sky that has always been waiting for you. Fear grows best in silence. It settles into the quiet corners of your mind, feeding on the words you never say, the questions you never ask, the truths you keep buried because they feel too heavy to carry aloud. In silence, fear has space to exaggerate, to rewrite reality, to convince you that you are alone in your struggle. It thrives when you believe no one would understand, when you tell yourself it is safer not to speak. Silence can feel like protection, but often it becomes a prison. When you do not name your fear, it begins to name you. It starts defining what you attempt, what you avoid, and what you believe you deserve. Unspoken fear grows roots. It seeps into your decisions quietly, disguising itself as logic, caution, or patience, until one day you realize you have been living according to rules you never consciously chose. Truth, however, has a different power. Truth brings light, and fear has never been comfortable in the light. The moment you speak honestly, whether to yourself or to someone you trust, fear begins to lose its grip. It may not disappear instantly, but it becomes smaller, more manageable, less commanding. Truth reminds you that fear is a feeling, not a prophecy. Facing truth requires gentleness and bravery. It asks you to admit what scares you without judging yourself for it. It asks you to acknowledge the hurt that taught you to be afraid. When you do this, you stop fighting your fear and start understanding it. And understanding dissolves much of the power fear once held. There is strength in saying, "I am afraid," because that sentence does not end the story, it begins healing. When fear is named, it no longer hides behind confusion. You can look at it clearly, see where it came from, and decide whether it still deserves a place in your life. Often, you discover that the fear guarding you is outdated, protecting wounds that have already healed. Truth also connects you to others. When you speak honestly, you realize that fear is a shared human experience, not a personal failure. Others have stood where you stand. Others have trembled and still moved forward. In that connection, fear shrinks further because it can no longer isolate you. Facing truth does not mean you must confront everything at once. Sometimes it is as small as admitting you want more or acknowledging that something no longer feels right. These small truths are powerful. They open doors. They loosen knots. They remind you that honesty is an act of self-respect. As you continue to face truth, fear becomes quieter. It still exists, but it no longer controls the room. You learn that you can live with fear without living under it. You learn that your truth is stronger than your doubt. So do not let fear grow unchecked in silence. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. Write it, whisper it, hold it gently in your heart if you must, but do not ignore it. Truth is not meant to harm you. It is meant to free you. And when fear meets truth, it always begins to fade. Every brave step you take rewrites your destiny, even when it feels small, even when no one is watching. Destiny is not shaped only by grand moments or loud victories. It is quietly formed by the choices you make when fear tells you to stay still and you choose to move anyway. Each step forward, no matter how uncertain, alters the direction of your life in ways you may not see immediately, but will one day understand deeply. Bravery is often misunderstood. It is not always bold or confident. Sometimes it is hesitant. Sometimes it is trembling. Sometimes it is taken with a racing heart and shaky breath. But bravery counts the same, no matter how it looks. When you choose to act despite fear, you interrupt the old pattern. You refuse to let yesterday decide tomorrow. That interruption is powerful. That is where destiny begins to shift. There were paths your fear kept you from taking, opportunities you delayed, versions of yourself you postponed becoming, not because you were incapable, but because you were careful. And careful living can slowly turn into confined living. A brave step does not erase the past, but it loosens its hold. It says, what happened before does not get to define what happens next. Each brave decision teaches you something new about yourself. You learn that you can survive discomfort. You learn that rejection does not destroy you. You learn that failure is not the end of the road, but part of learning how to walk it better. With every step, your confidence grows, not because fear disappears, but because you stop believing fear is stronger than you. Destiny is not fixed. It responds to your courage. When you speak up instead of staying silent, you change the way the world meets you. When you try again instead of giving up, you open doors that once felt sealed shut. When you choose yourself after years of doubt, you begin a future that once seemed impossible. There will be days when bravery feels exhausting, when progress feels slow, when fear returns with familiar arguments. On those days, remember that even pausing without quitting is a brave act. Destiny is not rewritten in one sentence. It is revised line by line. Persistence matters as much as courage. Do not underestimate the impact of one honest choice. One decision to trust yourself more than your fear can redirect years of your life. One brave step can lead to another and another, until one day you look back and realize you are standing somewhere you once only imagined. You are not late. You are not behind. You are standing exactly where the next brave step is possible. And that step, however small it may feel, carries more power than you know. Destiny is listening to your choices. Speak to it with courage. Your voice was never meant to tremble. It was meant to rise. Yet fear taught it to whisper, to second guess its own worth, to ask permission before speaking its truth. Somewhere along the way, you learned that silence felt safer than being seen, that holding back was easier than being misunderstood. But your voice carries history, wisdom, and power, and it grows restless when it is kept small for too long. A trembling voice does not mean a weak message. It means your truth is pressing against old walls. It means you are speaking from a place that matters. Fear wants you to believe that confidence must come before expression, but life teaches the opposite. Confidence is born through use. Your voice strengthens each time you allow it to be heard, even when it shakes. There were moments you stayed quiet to keep peace, moments you swallowed words to avoid conflict, moments you convinced yourself that what you had to say did not matter enough. Those moments were survival, not failure, but survival was never meant to be your final language. Rising is, and rising begins when you decide your voice deserves space. When you speak honestly, you do more than express yourself. You give permission to others to do the same. Your courage echoes. Your truth reaches places you may never see. Silence isolates, but voice connects. It reminds you that you are not alone in your fear, your hope, or your longing to be understood. Fear will warn you of judgment, rejection, and misunderstanding. It will tell you that your words are too much or not enough. But fear has never built a meaningful life. Your voice, however, has the power to heal, to inspire, to challenge, and to change. It does not need to be perfect. It needs to be real. Rising does not always mean speaking louder. Sometimes it means speaking clearer. Sometimes it means saying no when you were expected to agree, or saying yes when you were expected to shrink. Sometimes it means telling your own story before someone else tells it for you. Each act of expression reclaims a piece of yourself. There will be times your voice shakes again. That does not mean you are moving backward. It means you are stretching beyond what once felt possible. Growth often feels like exposure before it feels like strength. Trust that your voice will steady as you honor it. Your voice was shaped by everything you have lived through. It carries resilience, compassion, and insight that only you can offer. The world does not need another echo of fear. It needs the sound of you standing in your truth. So let your voice rise. Let it be heard in conversations, in decisions, in the way you live your life. Speak with kindness. Speak with courage. Speak even when your heart beats fast. Your voice is not a liability, it is your legacy. Fear is a visitor, not the owner of your future, yet too often it behaves like it holds the keys. It arrives uninvited, settles into your thoughts, rearranges your plans, and convinces you that it belongs there. Over time, you may forget that fear was never meant to stay. It was never meant to decide where you go, who you become, or how brightly you live. It came to warn you, not to rule you. Visitors come and go, but when fear is mistaken for a permanent resident, it begins to dictate your choices. It tells you when to stop dreaming, when to lower your expectations, when to delay the life you desire. It speaks with urgency, pretending to be wisdom, disguising itself as caution. And if you listen too closely, you may start building your future around avoiding discomfort instead of pursuing truth. But your future does not belong to fear. It belongs to your courage, your curiosity, your willingness to grow beyond what feels familiar. Fear can knock, it can speak, it can even walk beside you, but it does not get to sit in the driver's seat. The moment you remember this, something shifts. You stop arguing with fear and start acknowledging it without surrendering to it. There will be times when fear feels convincing, when its voice sounds logical and its warnings feel urgent. In those moments, remind yourself that fear only knows the past. It remembers what hurt you, what failed before, what once went wrong. It does not know your future strength. It does not know how much you have grown, how deeply you have healed, how capable you are becoming. Fear speaks from memory, not from possibility. You are allowed to say to fear, "I see you, but you do not decide for me." That sentence is powerful. It creates space between feeling afraid and being controlled by fear. It allows you to move forward with awareness instead of paralysis. Fear may still walk with you, but it walks behind you now, no longer leading the way. When you stop letting fear own your future, you begin to make different choices. You take risks that align with your values. You speak up when silence once felt easier. You try again when quitting seemed safer. These choices are not reckless. They are intentional acts of self-trust. They signal that you are no longer living on fear's terms. Your future is shaped by what you repeatedly choose, not by what you repeatedly fear. Each time you act despite uncertainty, you weaken fear's claim. Each time you honor your inner knowing, you reinforce your authority over your own life. Slowly, fear learns its place, not as a ruler, but as a temporary presence. One day you will look ahead and realize your future feels lighter, wider, more open than you imagined. Not because fear disappeared, but because you stopped handing it ownership. You reclaimed your direction, you reclaimed your voice, you reclaimed your power. Fear may visit again, as it always does when growth is near. When it does, greet it calmly, then continue walking forward. Your future belongs to you, and you are finally ready to claim it. Healing starts when you stop negotiating with fear. For a long time, you may have tried to reason with it, to make compromises that felt sensible at the moment. You told yourself you would try later, speak later, dream later, when the timing felt safer. You promised fear just a little more patience, a little more delay, believing that one day it would loosen its grip on its own. But fear does not leave because you are kind to it. It leaves when you stop letting it make the rules. Negotiating with fear keeps wounds open. It convinces you that staying stuck is a form of protection, that avoiding pain will somehow lead to peace. Yet unhealed fear does not rest, it lingers. It shows up in hesitation, in self-doubt, in the quiet grief of knowing you are capable of more but not allowing yourself to reach for it. Healing asks for honesty, not avoidance. When you stop negotiating with fear, you stop asking it for permission. You stop waiting for it to approve your next step. You acknowledge its presence without letting it control your pace. This is not an act of force, it is an act of self-respect. You decide that your well-being matters more than fear's comfort. Healing often begins with discomfort. It begins when you choose clarity over confusion, truth over excuses. It begins when you admit that fear has been costing you parts of your life, your joy, your confidence, your sense of possibility. That admission can be painful, but it is also freeing. You cannot heal what you refuse to face. There will be moments when fear tries to bargain again. It will promise safety if you stay small, familiarity if you stop trying. But healing teaches you to recognize these offers for what they are, old patterns dressed as protection. You learn to say no without anger, no without explanation, no without guilt. And in that no, you create space for peace. As healing unfolds, you begin to respond differently to fear. Instead of shrinking, you pause. Instead of retreating, you breathe. Instead of obeying, you choose. These small shifts are powerful. They signal to your mind and body that you are no longer trapped in survival mode. You are learning how to live. Healing does not erase your past or pretend your fear was unnecessary. It honors what you endured while refusing to let it define what comes next. It allows you to move forward without dragging old wounds into every new experience. It teaches you that growth does not require perfection, only presence. When you stop negotiating with fear, you reclaim your energy. You redirect it from worry into intention, from doubt into action. You begin to trust yourself again, not because you feel fearless, but because you know you can handle what comes. That trust is healing in its purest form. Over time, you notice the change. You feel lighter in your choices, steadier in your decisions. Fear still exists, but it no longer dominates the conversation. Healing has taken its place, and healing speaks gently, confidently, reminding you that you are safe enough now to move forward. You have spent enough time bargaining with what holds you back. Healing is calling you to stand firm in what moves you forward. Stop negotiating. Start choosing yourself. Your past may whisper doubt, but your soul speaks strength. Every scar, every misstep, every moment you thought you could not go on carries a lesson, a quiet proof of resilience. The past has a voice, yes, but it does not own the future. It may remind you of mistakes, missed opportunities, and fears that once ruled your days, but your soul knows a truth that is louder and older. You have endured, you have survived, and you are still here, ready to rise again. Doubt is persistent. It sneaks into your mind like a shadow, reminding you of all the times you felt small, inadequate, or unprepared. It may replay old failures as if they define who you are today. But your soul speaks a different language. It does not judge. It does not linger on shame. It speaks of courage, of perseverance, of the strength you may not always recognize in the moment. Listening to it is an act of bravery itself. Every challenge you have faced has left its mark, but those marks are not signs of weakness. They are evidence of endurance. The times you stumbled and yet kept walking, the moments you felt hopeless and yet found a way forward, the nights you cried and yet woke up determined. All of these testify to your inner strength. Your soul remembers these truths even when your mind forgets. Strength is not the absence of doubt. It is moving forward in spite of it. Every time you choose to stand after disappointment, to speak after silence, to try after failure, your soul's voice grows louder. It becomes impossible to ignore. Doubt may whisper, but it cannot shout over the sound of your own resilience. Each act of courage, no matter how small, is a declaration that you are stronger than the fears that seek to hold you back. You may find that the past still tries to define you, that old voices still echo in your mind, that insecurities still rise like waves. This is natural. Growth is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to recognize that the struggle does not have the final say. Your soul is patient. It waits for you to remember who you really are, and it will always guide you back to the path of your own strength. It is in the quiet moments of reflection that your soul speaks most clearly. When you pause and breathe, when you allow yourself to feel without judgment, when you honor your journey rather than condemn it, you hear the deep, unwavering truth. You are capable, you are resilient, you are whole enough to face what comes next. Your past may whisper, but it is your soul that carries the real story of who you are. Let the whispers of doubt remind you of lessons learned, but let the voice of your soul remind you of power earned. Each step forward, each brave decision, each moment of self-trust is a reaffirmation that strength has always been yours. Listen closely and let that strength guide you beyond fear, beyond hesitation, and into the life you were always meant to live. Your soul's strength is patient, persistent, and unwavering. No past can diminish it. No doubt can silence it. It is your guide, your anchor, and your most faithful companion on the journey ahead. This moment is calling you forward. Answer it without apology. The call is not quiet. It does not whisper, take it slowly, or wait until you are ready. It arrives with a force that shakes your hesitation and demands your attention. Life is not asking for permission. It is asking for participation. And participation begins with the courage to step fully into the now, without excuses, without reservations, without bargaining with fear. Too often, we delay answering life's call. We tell ourselves that tomorrow will be safer, that next week we will be braver, that someday we will be ready. But tomorrow is uncertain, and someday may never arrive. The present is the only place where growth happens, where dreams take shape, where courage can be exercised. When this moment calls, it asks for your presence fully, not partially, not timidly, but boldly, unapologetically. Fear will try to convince you that you are not prepared. It will remind you of past mistakes, of moments when things did not go as planned, of times you felt too small to matter. Fear thrives on hesitation, on convincing you that waiting longer will make things safer. But waiting does not make you ready. It only postpones what is yours to claim. This moment is proof that readiness is often a choice, not a condition. Answering life without apology requires that you honor your truth above all else. It asks that you stop shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. It asks that you stop silencing your dreams to avoid discomfort or judgment. Each time you say yes to this moment, you assert that your life is your own and that no one else gets to dictate the shape of your courage or the timing of your growth. There will be resistance, internal and external. Old habits will tug you backward. Familiar doubts will demand your attention, and the voices of others may question your choices. Yet the beauty of answering without apology is that it is yours to do anyway. It does not depend on approval, validation, or certainty. It depends only on your willingness to trust yourself and the direction that calls to you. Every step you take into this moment, no matter how small, transforms the way you experience life. Momentum grows from action. Confidence grows from commitment. And the more you answer without apology, the more fear begins to recognize its true place, not as a ruler, but as a companion that can be acknowledged without obeying. The world has waited for your courage more than you realize. Opportunities, growth, connection, and transformation are all inextricably tied to your willingness to step forward now. Delay diminishes them. Hesitation dilutes them. But when you move boldly, when you claim this moment as yours without apology, you set in motion a series of possibilities that were once beyond imagination. This is your time. The moment has arrived, not by chance, but because you have lived, learned, and grown to the point where it is demanding your attention. Step forward fully. Speak, act, and live without apology. Trust that even if the path is uncertain, each step taken with courage brings you closer to the life that has always been waiting for you. Fear may notice, but it no longer commands. You do.